All right, welcome everyone. This is International UDL-based approaches for non-academic adult service support. My name is Susie Gronseth. I'm at the University of Houston in Houston, Texas, and I will be moderating this session. We have 3 speakers from different parts of the world, and let me show you. We've got Dr. Elizabeth Betsy Dalton. She's in Rhode Island. And Susan Rapheal is in India. And then joining us, hopefully in a little bit, will be Marcia Lyner-Cleophas, and she's in South Africa. And they're having some power rotation issues, so we're crossing our fingers that Marcia will be here live with us. So hopefully she'll pop in at some point. If not, we have some material from Stellenbosch University, where she is, that we will share with you about what's happening there and how they're working to reduce barriers for learners in South Africa, Cape Town area. So I know these gals through a number of professional organizations. We work in International Association for Special Education. We've done work in the Society for Information Technology and Teacher Education site. We have, Betsy and I put together a book this past year and a half, an edited book of international perspectives on inclusive instructional design. And we have worked with a lot of educators around the world through that. And so we really enjoy coming together in different events and conversations to share our ideas and our experiences and the projects that we're doing in our own unique context, from higher ed to K-12 to corporate training to all these different things that we kind of wear so many different hats. But we come together and we talk about the things that we're doing and thinking and learning about, and that sharing really helps us all grow and support each other. So we wanted to come together today and talk about the issue of adult service supports and talk about just some things that are happening and the work that's being done in 2 examples of India and South Africa. So just to kind of set the groundwork for where there's a thread that runs through what we're going to present over this session, is that the impact of UDL reaches beyond classroom and in the K-12 and higher ed environment, just the classroom setting. There's other things that happen around kind of like the face-to-face instruction or online instruction. And so we want to get into the support systems and things that people are doing to help reduce barriers in a lot of different aspects of adult learning. So we're going to start with Susan Rapheal and Betsy Dalton. And that work has spanned oceans. And so I'm going to hand it off to Susan to get us started in what's happening in India. And if you have joined us, welcome. If you could just mute your mic, that would be great. And we'll get going with Susan's presentation.
Yes, so namaste from India. I will just get started about the purview of disability in India. As you can see, there are 2.21% of the whole population of India who fall under the disability sector, and of which 1.5% are intellectually disabled. Now, to talk about the various difficulties that are faced by persons with disability in India, the lack of awareness and the accessibility that they have. They face a whole lot of attitudinal issues from people around them, and poor job opportunity because of non-acceptance. Currently, in the last 3 years, there has been a drastic change in the way people are looking at them because our Prime Minister has decided to refer to people with disability as Divyangjan or people with divine ability. Now, with this change, there is a lot of understanding towards people with disability, and from the policy level, intervention and the acceptance in India has just begun in comparison to many other countries. And institutions like ours, Home Creations and Home Abode, which you will hear about in the next few slides, work towards rehabilitation and they're existing. However, there are very few of us that are existing. Next slide. So, Home Creations Trust is an organization that began 29 years ago, and we have been working towards rehabilitating and giving job support to persons with intellectual disability, and especially people who are 18 and above. Primarily in India, people give education till 16, and after that there isn't much for persons with disability, and hence that this is what our organization does. And our founding member, Dr. Rapheal's belief and vision is that if we support the abilities of people with Down syndrome and other disabilities, it can be channelized into productive ways. As you can see in the picture, there's art and ceramic, and there's preparation in hospitality and catering department that we work towards. The next slide. So, although our organization has been 29 years old, we have been using unique methods and self-developed methods which fits the UDL principles perfectly. These are some of the programs that we practice for the FACE program, potential marking test, teacher capacity building approaches, the brain-based strategies, auditory intensive therapies, and of course the focus on three main areas of food, art, and ceramic work. Next. And Home Abode is a relatively new center that focuses on residential training. So students can come to our organization, they can live there for let's say 2.5 years and get trained in vocations and have job related training that probably will fetch them a job in the mainstream. And this organization focuses on training 320 individuals with special needs on campus. And all these programs will follow the UDL factors in training. Next slide. So, how we began was that although we have these self-developed programs and we found that they fit in the UDL principles, we said, okay, we have to introduce this concept, and that is how Dr. Elizabeth Dalton came to India, and we had a training session with our staff at Home Abode, and the trainers at our center are special educators, and some are artists, and some are chefs from the industry who need to teach the vocations that we intend to teach. And although they are from a professional background, it was a challenge to get them to understand the principles because the principles were very well structured and we had to break it down to make them understand. And I guess from this, Dr. Dalton will take over and tell us what's next, what we did in India. Next slide. So I'm handing over the mic to Dr. Dalton.
Thank you so much, Susan. Just to revisit, well, in that last slide, you saw a picture of myself there in Mumbai, actually conducting the training workshop. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that particular workshop and the differences with the focus of this professional development workshop and the people that were involved with it. I've been working in universal design for learning for probably about 15 years. And I've known of Om Creations and the work in Mumbai for about 10 years. Next slide, please. So, of course, this whole day is about universal design for learning and how it relates to and can support our work in higher education in a variety of settings. And we're talking about settings that are outside of the university. So here we have the 3 principles of universal design for learning, just to remind ourselves of the focus for what the training was going to be involved with. Next slide, please. One of the things that I've done over the past years is to work with presentations in a variety of areas. And one of the unique things about working with the staff with Om Creations is that they are really a vocational training center involved so much in the arts. And so I wanted to just highlight the 2 areas that I really feel connect with this. One being choice, that the Universal Design for Learning framework really supports the opportunity for and the methods for planning to embed choice in what the training that we provide and the learning that is involved. And then, of course, on the other side is creativity. And you'll see this in this picture. This is a picture, of course, of the brain and all of the different activities that go on in our brain. And you can connect for yourself how these ideas of choice and creativity connect with all of the neurological functions of the brain, which of course is what Universal Design for Learning is based on. Next slide. So choice is important for a number of different reasons. And one being it helps us to be more engaged in what we're doing and more connected with it. And because of that engagement and we become more motivated in terms of the opportunities for learning. Choice can help to drive greater accessibility because when we embed opportunities for different types of learning, we expand the opportunities for accessibility. It can also help students to become greater self-advocates for themselves and become more efficient because they have the opportunity for choice. It helps with attention to tasks because through choice, I know for myself, when I can choose something to participate in, I will just normally attend to it much more effectively. And choice, of course, by its nature involves various alternatives. And it also involves the use of executive functions because to determine and to make the decision about which way to go with how to engage in learning and how to represent learning and how to respond and show what you've learned, that of course engages our executive functions. Next slide, please. So on the other side, the creativity side, these I actually pulled directly from the various guidelines for Universal Design for Learning. And here you see that creativity connects directly with those guidelines. So creativity itself provides various options for perception and in Om Creations, of course, we have the arts that are highlighted in their work. And so there are many different ways that perception is important in that. Of course, it expands opportunities for the students and the individuals and the young adults at Om Creations to expand their ways of expressing themselves, opportunities for being able to communicate their ideas more effectively through various creative means, and options for providing various options for different types of physical responses, ways of facilitating their own personal strategies through options for creativity, and then being able to highlight patterns and big ideas through bringing in creative means. Okay. One of the things I wanted to highlight is this idea of working with adult learners. So when you're providing training in professional development, and particularly in this particular session that I did for Om Creations, it's important to keep in mind that adults and the way that adults focus on learning and connect with learning is really different from what we do with young children. And here you have Knoll's theory of andragogy as opposed to pedagogy, right? So these are 5 assumptions that he's identified for adult learners. And I've used these assumptions in many of the trainings I've done to frame the type of activities and the type of connections that I embed within the training. I think it's important to recognize how adults learn and to focus in on that. So first of all, adults tend to have a stronger self-concept because they've lived more and they've connected more, and they can direct their own learning more. Secondly, they have lots of past learning experiences, and it's very important in anything we do with adults to help them to see the connections and to draw their own connections with their past learning experiences. It makes it so much more meaningful for them. The third one being that adults have a greater readiness to learn, that many adults, you know, they've gotten to the point that they really value education and now they're ready to learn. I spent 13 years as a counselor for students with disabilities at a community college, and I really found that the adults that came to the community college at that time with disabilities were much more ready to take control and to apply the types of things they needed to once they were at college, rather than when I was working with them when I was working with children earlier in my career. So adults have a great readiness to learn for the most part. They need to be connected with practical reasons for why they're learning what they're learning. This is something that I always keep in mind when I'm doing my training. And then the fifth assumption about adult learners is that they're driven more by internal motivation, that for children, they often need external motivators, but for adults, they've gotten to a point where they can be more internally motivated. So they have to have control of what they're learning so that it can connect with that internal motivation. Okay, next slide. So this is how we framed the session for Om Creations. And here you see it says Om Abode. So while I was working at Om Creations for about a month this past summer, we actually had the training at Om Abode, which was such a wonderful experience. And it was a 2-day training, and we had morning and afternoon sessions. And here you see what we covered. We had the first session that focused on learning, first understanding what universal design for learning is and what its core principles are. All of those things were very, very new for the adults that were participating in the training because actually all of them were not from an educational background. They were from an arts background, or they were from a culinary background. So they really didn't have the background in education that typically when you're working with people in higher education have. So it was important to go over these things in detail and to give the participants an opportunity to talk about them. And then we explored what those ideas were. How do those ideas connect to the instruction that they were doing? And then we went further into the UDL guidelines, some of the tools and strategies that are used with the guidelines. And I also used a UDL educator checklist, actually the one that we developed in Rhode Island, which was modified from the CAST checklist. And so that was the first day. And then the second day was more the application, working with the UDL checklist, connecting it to their own creative ideas, and then using that framework in a way that connected to something that they really needed to do. And that was so critical for these individuals, was to connect with the realities of their work and what they needed to do with the young adults there at Ohm Creations. And then finally, of course, connecting with sharing and reflecting upon what they learned. They planned their ideas with the group. They considered other perspectives when we had presentations. They did a final project. And then talking about what does that mean for the future. And I know that Susan is going to talk about that in just a little bit. Thank you. So this is a picture of one of the training sessions that we had and the participants there. And you can see that we're actively discussing what's going on. Next. Next slide, please. This is a picture of a creative activity. And here you see actually Dr. Khanna and myself. I am, of course, quite amazed at the fact that they were able to do this creative activity, which was to find a way to roast corn in an hour without having any matches or anything like that. They had to go out and figure this out. And you can see that some of the students were quite successful in doing that. So, and that's one of the types of creative activities that Dr. Khanna has included in her trainings in Mumbai at Ohm Creations for many years, and we included that within our activity. And then here you see one of the participants providing their final project and being very creative in doing that. So I thought you'd enjoy seeing some of the actual shots from our training. And then at the end, we had a wonderful celebration, and with dancing and singing and connecting with others. And it was just a tremendous experience for myself, and I hope for all of the students that were involved. So thank you. That's what I had to share.
So taking from the session that we had with Dr. Dalton, what we did further was to make a plan how we are going to include the principles in our daily work. So to make them further understand the UDL principles, what we had to do is get a Hindi version of the UDL principles and highlight the keywords so that it was easy for the teachers to understand the concepts and use it frequently in their work. So the next slide, please. So as you can see, we have divided into the four principles. And of course, we got the ready translation from Google Translate. However, even Google Translate was giving a very complex form of Hindi, which we, in our center, made it further easy by breaking it down into a daily language that they use to communicate with each other. And with this came a lot of understanding and a lot of motivation among the teachers to use the strategies that they are using into the three core principles of UDL design. And the first one being the means of representation. So when it came to making a product in art or ceramic, we had the teacher, the trainer, demonstrate how to make the products and the steps involved through pictorial or the actual practical mode of representation. And the students as in the young adults with disability could observe while the production was going on, and in practice, the teachers would know which is the key difficult movement or the key difficult step the student is unable to achieve, and we could practice that. And of course, the picture you can see there is yoga and meditation. This Indian philosophy of yoga and meditation has gone a long way in helping our students to focus, in finishing or in being able to finish their work. And at the end of every session, you can see that there's a teacher question that we ask the teachers. At the end of every session, they have to record this, that what mode of representation did they choose in simple terms. Next slide, please. In multiple modes of expression, we use this as a buffer or a pre-production session where the students could practice the skills that they learned. You can see the girl who is painting a diya, which is a lantern that is used during the festival of Diwali in India. There was an order for 8,000 of them to be painted, and this girl would get tired in few hundreds. So the teacher created a strategy of giving a slab below her wrist, which she could use to complete the diya, and she could engage herself in many modes, and the production capacity increased. Then the other picture which says about a chain where they have to create a pattern. They did visual representation so that they could continue to express what they wanted to do through that visual representation. In all of that, you can see another girl who is using a computer. She is she falls under ASD. She has autism spectrum disorder, and she was reluctant to use paint because of the texture. So she created her own designs of diyas on her computer, and we use that as a wall hanging or one of the products that we created in our center. And again, there isn't any picture, but in the food department that we have, it is a similar process that we do. We allow them to practice the recipe and get the finest mode of production by the end of the training. And again, the teacher questions. And then for multiple means of engagement, is the actual production. So what happens in our center is in the three departments, what we teach are made into products and that go into the market to be sold. So, and we have a certain quality standard that we need to meet. And once the student is aware that their products are going to go into the market, and if it doesn't meet the standard, it will be rejected. They are more into getting the work done. And one of the very important factors is we give them a plan. Every day there is a production plan that we give to the student. That you need to make 50 of these, you need to make 60 of these, and you need to make 150 of this product. And it brings in a lot of discipline in the manner that they work. And of course, the one main thing is in the area of art, we get the students to bring out their own ideas. So there is no right or wrong. There is no much of emphasis on quality in terms of art, because they create what comes into their mind, and that is used to create another product which will be brought out in the market. And of course, it is a question that give us a way forward into how to make things better for the students, or how to improve the way we have functioned in this, in making a particular product. Next slide. So this is what we are practicing currently, the plan that we created in the 3 fields of education that we train and give job-related training to. And we continue to use this plan. And perhaps in the future, we will have the teachers to make a form with the strategies used and what needs to be done and share the same with all the staff so that there is an exchange of information among the trainers. And perhaps have a study in the near future on the effect of using UDL principles in vocational skill and job support for persons with intellectual disability. And yes, so I think in vocational training, we have been successful in creating this an alternative method to understanding how we can train and perhaps set a mark for many others if you want to practice such ideas. So, thank you. I'm handing over the mic to Dr. Marcia from South Africa.
All right, let's see it. How's the mic working today? Let's give it another shot. Marcia, try to use your mic again. All right, how about I'll advance through the slides. If it happens to cooperate with us, you can take over, but you can put some comments in the chat because that does seem to be working. And we'll take a look at what's happening in South Africa. So Marcia wrote a chapter in the book that Betsy and I edit. So it's been really interesting to see her perspective and how she situates universal design for learning within a social justice kind of approach. And she's looking at how, there's just this huge spectrum of how individuals function from, different sensories, cognitive processing, mobility, and it has great implications for how information is communicated through the student support services and the kinds of buildings and structures that are on a university campus for students. She talks a lot about how universal access is kind of at that cornerstone, which means that we remove cultural, physical, and other barriers that would prevent people, including persons with disabilities, from entering, using, or benefiting from the various systems of society that are available to other citizens. And so not having accessibility or even denying access, which has been, a big issue in South Africa, means that some people aren't going to be able to participate in the activities. And I know in the United States, it's that equitable access, the timeliness, the same, having a similar kind of content experience. So it's grounded in the universal design concept, which the design of products, environments, programs, services to be usable to people to the greatest extent possible without having to adapt or create specialized separate kinds of products. And so universal design is thinking about what it could mean for all the users and designing intentionally from the beginning so that it can be usable by people of varied ages and abilities to the greatest extent possible. So there's this interesting relationship, I think, between universal design and usability. So if we look at how we can make design accessible to everyone, there's 7 principles of universal design: equitability, flexibility, being simple and intuitive, having perception information, a tolerance for error, low physical effort, and size and space. And you can see these principles ring true through how people are applying universal design and universal design for learning, as well as other inclusive instructional design frameworks, because Betsy and I have learned as we've been doing our work internationally that people have different ways that they are approaching inclusive learning, UDL being one, but there are a lot of homegrown kinds of approaches that have some kind of similarities to what we see in UDL and UDI. And so I found that very interesting, and having some global conversations with educators in other parts of the world. So in the student services area of Stellenbosch, here's a kind of a capture. Let's go there through a photo journey. Stellenbosch has a lot of old historical buildings, and Marcia and I met earlier this week, and we were talking about how it's so difficult to upgrade buildings to make them more accessible because there are these heritage laws that restrict the ability to make those updates that would make it more accessible. So there is a will, but sometimes that there's these kind of challenges that get in the way. And so here's another historical residence that has some accessibility issues. So how do we create welcoming and universally inclusive environments? So Marcia and her team have been looking at areas like, you know, the structural elements, information resources, web communications, looking at their website. How accessible is the website? How can a prospective student access the information that he or she needs through the website? And what if the student is using support tools like a screen reader? How is the website functioning for him or her? They have student application programs, and there's different applications that run things like food bookings and residence renewal. And I can definitely relate to that. At the University of Houston, we have kind of a centralized system for our learning management system, for instance, but then there's a separate system for managing student information. And then there's another system for, you know, registering for a certain event. And so like there's this combination of systems, and making sure that all of the different systems are accessible to our students. And then Marcia's challenge highlights a few challenges on campus. And so as she went around, she took some pictures for us of some things that she's seen that's just a regular challenge around Stellenbosch. Sometimes the cars are blocking the walkways. And so as you can see here, it makes it really difficult to, even though the walkway is paved, it's smooth in this point, it's blocked because there's not enough room to park and have the walkway. Sometimes the pavements don't continue all the way. So here it's interrupted. There's no bridge built in there. There's no way to get across. You have to clunk, get down, clunk, get up. But, you know, there's not that curb cut. I mean, that's kind of our picture to start into this thinking of access for all. So sometimes we have narrow old doorways and high card readers, as you can see here. So it makes it difficult for someone who's accessing in a wheelchair, for instance, to be able to get the height of that card reader and get into the narrow doorway. So what are some things that we can do to make things more welcoming and accessible for all? Her office has been doing student consultations, therapy sessions, workshops, providing interpreters when needed. Looking at how to make different aspects of the residence halls more accessible, one thing being the bathroom area. So here's a redesigned bathroom. Also looking at inclusivity in the area of providing gender neutral bathrooms to support, you know, people who are in the LGBTQI communities and making it more inclusive and accessible. Adding some painted white lines on steps to enhance visibility. My goodness, without those white lines, that would be a huge risk. Tactile paving to improve the walkways. So, you know, you get that sensation when you pass over the ridges. Installing induction loop systems so that there could be hearing access. Thinking about how to do accessible workshops. So enhancing the understanding of supporting our learners in different ways. Considering the different kinds of assistive technologies and devices that we can provide our learners and help them to be able to use. Sometimes learners aren't aware that there are tools, and there are tools being developed and expanded and being made more widely available all the time. So it's kind of a moving target for learners, users, educators to know what's available and when you can use it. But she's got up here a few examples of some of the things that they found to support their learners. And I can definitely relate too, because, you know, when we have a learner that says, you know what, a speech to text kind of support would probably really help you get that initial draft going of your paper. It's like a light bulb goes on. Yeah, there are those things that are available now. Here's an example of door handles that provide greater functionality. So instead of a small, like round, hard to reach door handle, if there's one that was larger, that would take into account the variety of ways that people access that door handle. So, you know, kind of getting out of a one way of thinking and thinking more broadly about how can you make a design that meets multiple user needs. We can do the same thing when we're looking at print communications. So what would be some ways that we could make a invitation or an announcement or a flyer for an event, or even the planning of that event more inclusive, thinking about physical and hearing and visual needs, dietary needs, all those things that would be, you know, providing options and inclusivity for the people who would be coming. Here's an example of providing accessible transportation to events. And you may think that this is, you know, just kind of like a given when you plan an event, but in my experience, particularly traveling all over the world, I have found that accessible transportation to events is sometimes a thing that gets just not considered, and it can create a huge barrier for people to be able to participate in all of the different offerings. There are accessible gym equipment that can be provided in recreation spaces. Here's another example of a more accessible entrance to the residence spaces, providing lifts that can accommodate everyone, greater access through the stairs. And so there are some redesign, some refurbishing, some updating that's happening at Stellenbosch so that the universal design can be better incorporated. The way forward, staff training, trying to help educate those that are directly supporting our students in universal design and universal design for learning, both in the instruction and curriculum development, and then also the spaces that are surrounding that student experience. And then providing education to the students, so student workshops in universal design and universal design for learning. That can become a social justice kind of tool for understanding diversity more broadly. And our slides are available within a shared folder that we've linked on the Google document provided for this session. It's linked off of the agenda for the UDLHE DigiCon. So you can access a PDF copy of our slides as well as some of the other handouts and resources that our presenters have mentioned. Overall, what we want to kind of stress is that we want to think about what works best for the most users. So for instance, in this little graphic, shoveling off the stairs is only going to serve a small segment of those people that would use that entrance. But if you shoveled off the ramp, everyone would be able to access. So in the remaining time that we have a few questions we'd like to open up to our attendees and have some discussion through the chat. Our first question, what are some ways that you can think of to apply UDL and your higher ed support service systems to support students with disabilities? So if you could put your thoughts in the chat on what you think are some ways to add to some of the things that we've shared from India and South Africa and the United States. And there are many other ways to support our learners in the student services side of things.
Susie, can I just pop in for a moment?
Sure, go ahead.
Hi. I just wanted to comment a little bit on the University of Stellenbosch and the work that Marcia has done there. I've had an opportunity to visit Stellenbosch University to do some training there, and also to see some of the advances. I have to say that Marcia has done such an excellent job in really leading the way of bringing these concepts together. First, the physical universal design concept of, making physical environments accessible, and also then blending it with the concepts of universal design for learning and how that can and should impact the modifications and adjustments and training that goes on there for being sure that the students that can now physically come and participate in school can have access to the curriculum. So I think it's very important. And then really looking at those as what universal access means. When we talk about universal access, it means both access to the physical and educational environments that we have in our schools and in other training environments too.
All right, let's see if we have some takers possibly on the second question of application. Some ideas on how to apply the UDL framework for vocational and non-academic purposes. If you have some thoughts there, post those in the chat.
Susie, would we want to read some of these examples for the recording?
That's a great idea. Would you like to do that? They're starting to come in.
Sure. Well, first of all, we have from Kathleen Bastido and John that to look for free, accessible higher ed course materials and that they're out there. And it was asked if Kathleen could provide any examples of that. So possibly, Kathleen, you could respond to that. Inspector Gadget, hello, says start small, offer slides with corresponding Word documents, video, at least some captioning, and recorded slides with captions. Ask the audience what would help. It's all right. It's all right to do so privately as well. And having worked as a counselor for students with disabilities, it absolutely is. It's important to invite our participants to share their needs and to discuss at their in the way that they feel most comfortable. And to look for different formats of the material. Of course, that's certainly part of the Universal Design for Learning framework in terms of different ways of representing material. Susie shares that she likes involving her students in the creation of multiple means and sharing with our class. I don't have to create all of the different formats to give input to, give opportunity for some control of the various formats, getting that from the students themselves. And here's some examples from Kathleen. The Khan Academy, YouTube videos with actual captions. Ask companies and publishers if they can make items accessible, and if not, say you will look elsewhere. And that's important for higher ed individuals or anyone in education to work with their publishers to make sure that they have materials that can be made, either are or can be made accessible. When sharing a document with pictures, make sure they have alt text. Certainly that's important for online accessibility. And a note to Kathleen, I have the UDI and accessibility resource. Would you like to have the link? And do you have some that you could share with me? And actually, Kathleen was involved with writing a chapter in the book on online accessibility. So it would be good for folks to stay connected in that way and to give resources in advance, even a day, if possible. And I've definitely done that in my work in higher education. Design with compassion and an inclusive mindset. Remember that you are not the learner, that they are varied. And a comment is that that's a great point. Actually, you are also the learner because you are teaching and learning at the same time. And I think that's very, very important. And it helps to connect your audience, connect with your audience and help them to feel that you are connected with them. And then, and that's pretty much the comments that have content involved. Thank you so much.
Let's wrap up.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you for sharing your ideas. You can access the slides and our contact information through the shared resources. And we hope you have a great rest of your day, evening with the UDLHE DigiCon.